First They Came by Martin Niemöller. So on the right is a picture of Martin, and let's read the poem. First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. Okay, so a little bit about Martin. He was born in Germany in 1892. His dad was a Christian priest, and he actually studied for years to be a Christian priest like his father. He was one of the early supporters of the Nazi Party, and he spent a few years in the German Navy in World War I. After initially supporting the Nazi Party, he regretted his decision after the Nazi Party started to oppress churches, and because of that, he got targeted by Germany and put in a concentration camp. Multiple, actually. When he got out, he spent the rest of his life traveling the world and telling his story to people, and also encouraging Germany to take responsibility for what they did. He ended up dying in 1984. So a little bit about First They Came. First They came about because of World War II, and because people refused to stand up for what they knew was wrong. Martin was one of the few who did stand up for what he knew was right. And he was a little bit angry at the people who didn't. So his hope in writing First They Came was that it would reach people and that it would inspire them to stand up for what is right. Okay, some notes and some annotation along here as well. First They Came is written from the perspective of a person in Germany who didn't speak out against Nazis. And though we can't tell much about the poem's narrator, we do know that they were alive during World War II and that they didn't speak out. And because of that, they were eventually taken by the Germans, probably to a concentration camp, and, well, we don't know what happens after that. But what we don't know is whether or not the person was a poet. That's fine, though, because we do know that it doesn't matter. This narrator was chosen for what I think is an obvious reason. They were chosen because they didn't speak out, and Martin wanted to show kind of what happens when you don't speak up against what's wrong. And that also kind of touches on situational irony, which is when what a character expects to happen is not what happens. Because they obviously didn't expect that as a result of not speaking up for other people, that there would be no one to speak up for them. You know? So, yeah. And then the tone. So the tone feels really formal to me, and they're using words like did not instead of didn't, which would be a little more of a casual approach. And because of that, I think it kind of contributes to the mood. I would describe the mood as kind of somber. I would describe it as formal, and I would describe it as very serious. There are, of course, other things that contribute to mood, one of which is rhythm. The rhythm of the poem is in a 3-line structure, and it's kind of helped along by the use of another literary term called enjambment, which is where one single sentence is broken off into multiple lines. That is how he achieved this 3-line pattern. And I think that it kind of dampens the effect of the emotions on the poem, which is obviously not what he intended, but that's just how it feels to me. And then I think that the reason Martin wrote this poem is to promote activism, which actually relates to one of the themes, which is that activism is crucial to human rights. Because in this poem, it kind of shows what happens when you don't really promote activism, and what happens is you get taken by Nazis. Yeah. I also noticed another theme, which is that people are more similar than we think. So you notice all of these different identities, like communist and socialist and trade unionists, and all these different identities, but they're all facing the same problem. And I think that that's meant to show how similar people really are. We're all facing the same problems every day, and we should all just maybe be nicer to each other. We're not that different. Another thing, gosh, I'm jumping around. Connecting back to the rhythm, I noticed a lot of repetition. So repetition is when a sentence or a phrase or a word or even a sentence structure is repeated time and time again, and that also helps the rhythm. It kind of helps it flow, is what I think, because this poem isn't really one that rhymes, but it has a really nice flow, and I think a lot of that is because of the repetition. Some other literary devices I noticed. I noticed foreshadowing. This is kind of aimed more at the reader than like the narrator, because the reader, we know what usually happens if the Nazis are coming for someone, they're gonna come for you next. And that's kind of the foreshadowing that I noticed here. And then I also noticed allusion, which I wrote in my annotations here. The allusion is when a phrase or a word is meant to remind you of something without directly saying what it's supposed to be reminding you of. So when this poem says, "they came for," it's referring to Nazis, though it doesn't outright say that, and it's a good example of allusion. Yes, why did I choose this poem? So I chose this poem because it's my favorite poem. There's more to that, though. It's my favorite poem because of all of the parallels I see this poem has into the world today. You see lawmakers in America in 2023 and 2024 making laws that you would expect to find in the 1900s. If you think about things like the abortion ban and also kind of the attack on transgender rights, you can see that American lawmakers are targeting groups just as groups were targeted back in Nazi Germany in the 1900s. And I think that's another reason that Martin wrote this. I already said that he wanted to inspire activism, but he wants to inspire activism throughout all eras. There will always be social injustice, and he knows that. And his hope in writing this poem is not just to inspire people to speak up against Nazis, it's to inspire people to speak up against anything. Just anything that they know isn't right. Okay, so now I'm going to do a line-by-line analysis. Starting with the first line of the poem, "First they came for the communists." First they came for the communists kind of means, like, it doesn't really have a hidden meaning. I already mentioned the allusion with the Nazis, like, they is referring to Nazis. And then But we see this pattern of repetition. Okay, so this here, and I did not speak out. This is arguably the most important repeated phrase throughout the entire poem. And that's because the entire poem is based on the fact that this guy did not speak out. And maybe what would have happened at the end is, if he did speak out, is instead of being taken by the Nazis, maybe they would have been abolished. There would be no Nazis, but that's not what happened because people didn't speak up, just like this person, and I did not speak out. Because I was not a communist. So, as I already annotated, this kind of gives selfish vibes to me. It makes me feel like this person isn't thinking about other people. And oftentimes we just look at other people and we don't really see what they're going through and realize that the same exact thing could happen to us. And that's kind of what happens to this person. So you see here a lot of repetition. And with this repetition, I did not speak out is one of the most important lines. And that's why it's repeated so many times. You see the other lines, they kind of like vary a little, but not this line. It's always the same. The person never speaks up. And that's why I think it's the most important line. And then we see more of this repetition a couple more times until we get to this line. It really intrigues me. Then they came from me. This is also one of the most important lines, and that's because the fruits of their labor is being shown, or I guess their lack of labor. And there was no one left because the person wouldn't help anyone when they were in need of help to speak out for me. So here are my questions to you. In what ways do you notice laws being passed that target groups today? Specifically, like, what laws, what groups, you know? Have you been part of an activist group? And if not, why? And if you were in Germany when the Nazis kind of had reign, would you have spoken up? And I'm not going to say I blame you if you wouldn't. It's scary. People were killed for speaking up. But do you think you would have? And then finally, we're excited.